get started. So before I get started, I do want to let you know that we are recording this, and this is so that we can share it out with other members. You'll we'll send it out, and like a lot of our other resources that we have recorded now in this post-COVID era, right? You can find it on our OIRP website under training/resources. All of our data and donuts recordings are available on there. I believe even we had some oh no, I don't think we had pre-COVID ones. And then all of our resources on there as well. If you're really interested in also diving into some of this data once a month, you can join our Institutional Effectiveness Committee meetings. Those are done every first Wednesday of the month, and those are recorded too. And you can also just go ahead and those are available for everybody. All right, let's go ahead and get started. We have our small but mighty research team here that's going to be presenting on this, and we're going to go ahead and get started. So next slide, please. Great. Oh, just to let you know, I'm not sure if everybody knows have us, but I'm going to do a quick introduction actually before we get started. So we are your Office of Institutional Research and Planning. Like I said, we are a small but mighty team of institutional researchers that dig into our NOCE data and look at our data across a variety of platforms, including state legislation and how it's being processed up at the state through our chancellor's office. So my name is Dulce Delgadillo. I'm the Director of Institutional Research at NOCE. I'm going to hand it over to our SRAs so that they can introduce themselves as well. So Harpreet, do you want to go first?
Yeah, thank you, Dulce. Hi, everyone. My name is Harpreet Uppal. I'm a Senior Research Analyst for NOCE and for our consortium NOC-RC. Thank you.
Thanks, Harpreet. Jason?
Hi all, I'm Jason Muckabali. I'm a researcher person who does MISE type things. I was actually in Julie's class before. Hi Julie, good to see you here. How you doing?
Hi Jason.
Great. We also have our other team members. Pragi, can you go please introduce yourself?
Hello, my name is Pragi. I'm admin here at Research.
Thank you. And then our other staff member, Andy, can you please quickly introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Andy. I'm a professional expert here for the Office of Institutional Research. Nice to see you again.
Awesome, great. Okay. So I want to go over really quick, what is our agenda? So for this piece, we really wanted to dive into kind of our community level data, specifically talk about some CAPE metrics, and then just dive into our adult ed launch board. So we're going to do a quick overview of what is this NOCE data, NOCCD data actually. So kind of like, what is the census saying? So if you remember, we just finished our last census in 2020. And so a lot of that new data is being utilized. So that census is done every 10 years, and it really takes kind of a pulse of that community of what is the age groups, gender, demographics, level of education, all of those components. So we'll dive into that. We'll also dive into those CAPE metrics. So we know that right now we are in the middle of 3-year planning, but even beyond that, CAPE actually encompasses all of adult education learners. And so we want to just understand what do those metrics mean for non-credit and for our programs as an institution, and then really diving into that data interactive tool, which is the Adult Ed Pipeline Launch Board, so that you can go in and be able to dig into mine your data. Next slide, sorry. So what's the purpose today and the learning objectives? So first of all, we want all of you on this event to really familiarize yourself with the district service area community data. So this is good just to kind of, again, get a pulse of what are the needs across the service area for our district, right? So what are the needs of our adult learners? Do we see a large proportion of them not having a high school diploma? Do we see maybe where are the concentrations of older adults in our service area? Where are the concentrations of our English as a second language learners in our community? So those types of questions we want to start digging into, in addition to what are the needs of different populations. So maybe does education levels and the need for those to achieve a high school diploma, is that greater for certain populations, maybe a certain age group or a certain race, ethnicity, or a certain region of the service area? Next, we're going to dive into those CAPE metrics and really dig deeper into what each of those metrics mean. So, reviewing that. The other objective is for you to go ahead and interact with the Adult Ed Launch Board. So Harpreet and Jason are going to be diving into kind of they'll be going through each of those filters, but I encourage you to go ahead, dive into that data, play around with the filters. We'll put in the chat the link so you can go ahead and interact with them as well. And you can follow along with Harpreet and Jason, or you can go down your own rabbit hole. And that last one is really to identify some rabbit holes. So if you've ever worked with us and have sat in a meeting with us, you know that we love to go down rabbit holes. And what do we mean by rabbit holes? We mean asking that one question and trying to get and find the answer. And maybe that takes us through some up and downs and some laughs and some cries, but we will get to, understanding our data a little bit more, and really how we can shed light at both a state level and a local level about all the great work that we're doing for adult ed learners in our region. Next slide.
Oh, this is supposed to be the Slido, and I don't see it on my screen.
Is it?
I wonder if it's because
Are
I
you in
don't have it.
presentation mode?
Yes, I'm in a presentation mode.
Did it have you log in?
No, it did not have me log in. Dulce, do you want to share your screen, or how do you want to go about the question? Because I can't.
It goes blank on mine too. Whoever created it should have had it done for with the login. Oh, here. Restart. Sorry. Let me try it. Go ahead and jump into the next one, and let's see if maybe at the end of it, I'll see if I can maybe bring it up on the presentation mode here.
All right, sounds good. So can you see the next? All right. So thanks, Dulce. So sorry, we had a little bit of a hiccup. It was supposed to be kind of like a poll question. We really wanted to get an understanding for our audience in terms of like what type of community data have you looked at or examined for your own purposes. But while we come back to that, we're just going to show you what community data you currently have available. So maybe your answer can be this when we do get to that poll, and then everyone will know that what community data we're talking about. So this on the screen here, what you see is kind of like a screenshot of a dashboard that has been made available to us by the Chancellor's Office and a third party, West Ed, that does a lot of work on adult education. And this dashboard, basically, it's very interactive, and we're actually going to go through this. It provides that data Dulce was talking about from the census, from 2020 census data. And when we go to the dashboard, we can actually narrow the data down to our consortium level, which is our community college district boundaries. So it's NOCCCD district boundaries, and based on our boundaries, these are the adults that reside within that region, and these are the adults that we want to aim to serve. So let me actually go to the screen here. So can you see, Dulce, can you see the dashboard? Okay, all right, awesome, thank you. So right here, I'm actually gonna drop this, or did someone already drop this in chat?
I did, yeah, I already dropped it in.
Oh, awesome, thank you, Dulce. So this is the community data that's available for all consortia to kind of dig deeper into to understand who are the adults that we want to aim to serve within our region. And if we look at our consortium or our district, there's a list of all the consortia within California that provide adult education, and we can scroll down and look for our consortium, which is North Orange County Regional Consortium for Adult Education, NOCRC. And if we click on that, it will filter the data down. So right here, what we get to see is all of the different demographic characteristics of the adults within our region. And actually for Waiowa purposes, in the adult population, they also count 16 plus. So this is not the true CAPE definition that looks at 18 plus and providing services to adults who are 18 and older. But for Waiowa purposes, it does include those who are 16 and 17. And for our regional consortium, as you can see, there's multiple tabs. So the first tab is, just at the demographic level, who are the overall population, how many adults we have in the region, what is the age breakdown? As you can see, it's much greater 50 and older category. What's the gender breakdown looks like, and so forth in terms of race, ethnicity, and this variable English language ability. They look at, those who responded yes to does this person speak a language other than English at home. So based on how folks responded on the census for this, and those who responded yes, they look to see what is then their English language ability. They identified ESLs or ELLs as those who speak less than well English. And then number of languages that are spoken by adults within our region, and then the top languages that are spoken within by adults at their homes within our region. So we can see 52% is English. Then we have Spanish, like more than a quarter, Vietnamese, Korean, and that kind of can tell us who are the adults that are coming to us at NOCE, and maybe also provide insight in terms of the languages or translation services that we possibly may need to provide to assist our students who may speak languages other than English. And then what is the educational attainment of the population, and then employment status. So just wanting to kind of lay the framework here, but then what you can do is you can actually dig deeper and look at the different breakdowns of different populations within our region. So we can look at those who are adults with disabilities within our region, and what does that, what does these demographic breakdowns look like for them? What does the demographics breakdown look like for foreign-born, those who only speak English or have those who have limited English proficiency skills, those who have identified as living, with income in near poverty or less, those with no high school diploma attainment, those who are unemployed, and those who have been identified as disconnected youth. And then disconnected youth includes 16 and 24-year-olds who are not attending school and who are unemployed. So we can look at, the different characteristics and the different background. And I know given our time, I'm not going to go into every single one of them, but what we really just wanted to showcase here was you can go into each of these little tabs and look into the data and identify where are the gaps, where are the student populations that maybe we still haven't been targeting, and whether it's those who have limited English because ESL is one of our big programs, or whether it's targeting students who are unemployed, adults unemployed, and offering our CT programs. And also we have a great DSS program, and then looking to see what does the demographic breakdown look like for this population in our region, and what does it look like for NOCE, and maybe doing that comparison to see, are we serving everyone that we want to serve? So that's kind of the intention behind this tab on ACS, on the fact sheets, which is based on the ACS American Community Survey data. Then there is another tab within the same dashboard, and then what this does is it actually compares the basic demographics, so your age, gender, race, and ethnicity, of what the data looks like at census, so for adults within our region, and then what the data is reported for the adults with the students within our region, because we do report NOCE, as part of our consortium, and then we have other adult education providers such as ROP, and their data gets reflected under our consortium for adult education pipeline launch board. So if we were to select consortium and again look at North Orange County Regional Consortium, so what it does is it compares the adult education within our region. So based on the census data and then what has been reported for our students. And here you can compare like, okay, what does age breakdown look like for our adults and what does it look like for our students versus gender? And like, as you can see, the big difference between the two data sources is while it's kind of like closer to 50-50 in the census for gender breakdown, we know based on even our institutional effectiveness reports that we serve 2/3 of the female students within NOCE, and which is apparent here, and then the breakdown of race and ethnicity. So we right now it's only at this level of comparison for these three metrics, but this kind of allows us to see how we are doing compared to our adults within the region. And then the next tab on the fact sheets is adult education pipeline transition. So this is a transitional data, and it looks to see how many of our students within our consortium transition to post-secondary, which is identified. This is basically capturing both post-secondary as those who transition to CTE or to non-development credit college courses. And here they separated the two. So transition to, it could be non-credit CTE, adult education CTE, or credit CTE, and then non-development credit college course. And then here you can break down the data at a consortium level. And then for NOCRC here, we can see the breakdown by race, ethnicity, gender, and age category. Again, just given the time, I'm not gonna go over every single one of them, but here we can kind of see like, out of a race and ethnicity, which group is performing higher, maybe relatively compared to others, or by gender or by age categories. And then lastly, in terms of data, quantitative data, we have data on labor market. And this is important for CAPE purposes, especially for CAPE planning purposes, because there is a section in the 3-year plan that kind of asks us to do kind of, a scanning and analysis of what does labor market data look like for our region. And this tab allows you to actually filter the data at a macro region, micro region, and county. So if we were to go and look at data for Orange County, right, it will tell us, it will show us what is the unemployment rate for Orange County, what are the 10 largest industries in Orange County, and then the 10 fastest growing occupations in Orange County. And then this data is further breaking down in terms of like the number of jobs, the estimated change within the 5 years, and median hourly earnings, and then additional information in terms of cost of living adjustments. But we can actually filter this tab further down depending on whether we want to concentrate on different levels of education. If we only care about what are the top 10 fastest growing occupations for students who have high school diploma or equivalent, and then this changes based on that population, right? And if we care about only like those students who maybe have some college, or because at NOC we're adult education providers, maybe we just want to look at these 3 specific educational levels because we're targeting these students with this this education level. But also I want to remind myself too, and be mindful that we may have students, like especially we know within our ESL program when we did a study that students may have actually higher degrees, that we may not be aware of, and they, especially in our ESL program, that just come to us to learn the language, but they may actually have these advanced degrees and help assisting those students gain employment in those fields. So depending on the program you are serving, it's good to look at filter this data down to see what are some of the growing occupations within the region. And then also we can break down the work experience, those that only require 5 years or less versus 5 years or more, less than 5 years, or not focusing on work experience at all. And whether there's going to be on the job training, what does that look like? So it allows us to select these different filters and kind of dive deeper into the data to understand what are the regional needs, what are the labor market needs of Orange County. And I know it's already 1:21 and we have a lot to cover, so I don't want to just keep going on this. And there is they added a new tab. This is kind of like a qualitative piece, just to kind of put in perspective, right? What does all these numbers mean? Like, these are our students, and they should student stories, like what does adult education, or what does an adult learner look like, what kind of pathways they may be taking, and what they have to say about these opportunities that exist for these students in adult education. So I thought it was really neat, and then you can read on this too, just to kind of go back to, again, reminding ourselves that this is for our students. So this, I'm going to stop here in terms of the community data and see if there were any questions while I was presenting. I know we didn't really dig deeper into any of the data, but just given the time, I wanted to just give a brief overview so that you can check out the actual tool on your own time. Did we have any questions, Dulce?
No, I don't see any. And then just given time, maybe we skip on the Slido to make sure, given that it's.
Okay, all right, sounds good. So I'm gonna go to next slide. Well, we did have questions for you, even though I zoomed through it, but we still wanted to see if you were paying attention. So we would like for you to participate and kind of tell us, if anything stood out for you while I was going through these tabs, or even like, I know like we didn't slow down to actually go over the different breakdowns of the data and see, what makes sense, like what stood out to you, given that I didn't really let you glance at it. But I just wanted to ask, like, what do you thought about this data tool? Will you be able to use it? And how will you be able to use it in your field? Like if you, do you see any kind of advantages of this? And I see Dennis's hand on my screen. So go ahead, Dennis.
I was just noticing that as we went across the data input from the community, the 50+ side of age was always remarkably higher than everyone else.
Yep. That's our service area.
I was very, very surprised. So that's good. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Anyone else?
And trending wise, Dennis, they're saying that that's going to jump up too in the next 5 to 10 years. So that proportion's even going to grow more.
Absolutely. And it's also more and more cognitively prepared students. The 55+ crowd now and the 55+ crowd in 10 years will be even more people that are very competent, very cognitive, and very able. They're not feeble.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Monica, I see your hand up. Not sure if you had a question or comment, Monica.
Sorry, I was on mute. I just started talking. I'm like, wait a minute, I'm on mute. Okay, so the difference, I just wanted to make sure I understand the difference between qualitative and quantitative. I believe quantitative is more data-driven in different fields, and quantitative is more of a description. Yes.
I'm sorry, I was trying to see if I was muted.
Oh.
And sorry, but yeah, so when we say quantitative data, it's more like numbers, right? We are kind of like quantifying things like number of students, and these are the outcomes, X number of students. And whereas qualitative data is the stories behind those numbers, right? So when we produce like student voices, when we're collecting feedback from students and they share, like if we were to say, X number of students completed their high school diploma, but then the qualitative piece would be actually sharing like student experiences, talking about like, the experience with the high school diploma program, maybe their journey on getting their high school diploma, just so we add value and breadth to those numbers. So that's how I distinguish quantitative versus qualitative. If anyone wants to add, but you're right in terms of explanation, like it adds that explanation piece, like the qualitative part to the numbers.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, and I just put a quick thing in the chat, just quantitative numbers or survey responses on a scale. too. So like 50% of students agreed or 75% of students strongly disagreed with something, right? So again, that number connected to it versus with the qualitative, it's those stories, open-ended questions in the surveys, nothing that has typically doesn't have numbers attached to it. It's the stories.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, Dulce and Harpreet.
No worries. All right. Okay, so I'm gonna go on the next slide, given that I feel like we're running out of time. All right, there was another slide of question, and I don't know what that question actually was.
We can ask it really quick, which was, does anybody use any type of labor market data to currently inform their programmatic decisions and offerings? We could just ask them, ask. So what here, and I can actually put it in the chat here. So what type of labor? All right, Khan, go for it.
So as a counselor, when I guide students, I often go to the CT website, and they have those different, pharmacy tech and medical assistant, and we kind of go over some information, and in there they do talk about salary data and things, but it's a more in-depth conversation than I think what the students were expecting. Because the students asking, well, how much can I make? And yes, that's the starting point. But then we talk about, the data. Where do you live? Are you planning to, work in a big company or a small mom and pop? So it's a really nice conversation. That's just a starting point. And then we kind of spread out from there. So that's what I use data for.
Awesome.
That's great. Thank you, Khan. Anyone else? All right. Okay. So given that we only have half an hour and a lot of metrics to cover, I'm just going to breeze through next one. So we really just wanted to show you our new product that just came on the market. And this is our CAPE 3-year plan NOCRC planning guide. And this was released, and I think you will see it soon on our website as well, and most likely on NOCRC website as well. But this
I'm putting it in the chat right now, actually.
Okay, awesome. Thank you, Dulce. So this was intended basically to support in the efforts of the 3-year plan that's coming up for CAPE that's due in June. But really a part of this this planning guide is useful for anyone who's working adult education in our region, because what we did with this planning guide was, and I'm gonna literally just scroll, is kind of show you, with some narrative and screenshot, like who are our current students, who are we intending to serve, who are we currently serving for NOCE and for NOCRC, and which also includes Garden Grove Unified School District, ROP, and NOCE as adult education providers, where our students are coming from, and then break down of the demographic data. And in addition to that, we looked at data of the regional, the regional community data that I kind of already showcased in the fact sheets. But we added more narrative, just explaining what the data looks like, and where are the differences that we noted in terms of the different characteristics. And then we looked at the Orange County regional plans, Orange County strong workforce plans, just to add more context in terms of, what does the labor market data, industry data looks like for our region. And then additional information in terms of like, what are some of the barriers to our students? We had some guiding questions that we provided data on. And what does the barriers to employment look like for students, for adults in Orange County, and for our students, what are they reporting? What industries is NOCE, NOCRC home to? And then this is kind of what we literally just talked about a few minutes ago. And then we looked at additional data in terms of labor market, MZ labor market data that looks at like, what kind of skills employers are looking at, what kind of industries are coming to Orange County or are growing in Orange County, and what, and then So that kind of just additional data to put things in context. And then part of the planning guide was on metrics that we are actually going to cover. So I'm not going to go over this, but I just wanted to show you that what you can find in this planning guide that might be useful, just in not just CAPE planning guide, but even in just like, you know, your everyday work, if you're interested in seeing what our students look like and their outcomes and what does the regional adults look like. All right. And then I'm gonna go on the next slide. So this is kind of more CAPE planning specific because this was a data and donuts geared toward our CAPE 3-year planning. So if for those of you who are actually working on the CAPE 3-year planning, you might have heard us talk about these mandatory metrics and optional metrics, and we've been presenting on this for a while now. We just wanted to kind of briefly go over those metrics before we kind of dive deeper into the launch board, so you can familiarize yourself with how you access the data on these metrics for NOCE or at a consortium level. And then, you know, what does that data look like for us in the launch board? And that is a statewide launch board. So, you know, anyone can go on it's publicly available. Anyone can look at anyone else's data. So if you're familiar, you know, if you want to know what is Rancho Santiago doing or other consortia doing, right, Mount SAC, then we can look at that data and they can look at our data as well. So briefly, just wanted to go over what are the mandatory metrics and what are the optional metrics. And then I was going to let Jason speak on this. Jason, sorry, didn't mean to like take over your slide, but Jason was going to go over this. I just had to stop myself. I got so excited. All right.
Well, CAPE is pretty exciting. Yay, CAPE planning. Who doesn't want to do some CAPE planning? So yeah, since we are kind of in the thick of things now in terms of our CAPE planning and mandatory metrics, there are 4 metrics on which we actually kind of have to report for our 3-year planning. 2 of them are at the consortium level, which are the number of adults served. That's we'll go into the details in a little once we get to the dashboard, but you know, it's basically all the students who are touched by NOCE, NOCRC, you know, ROP, any of our adult service providers. So they want to know how many adults we are projecting we're going to serve in the upcoming 3 years, and then of those we're gonna be serving, we're gonna also be looking at we're gonna have to select how many students out of those 4 barriers: English language learners, low literacy, low income, or long-term unemployed. How many of those student population, or how many of those adults we're going to be serving during the next 3 years? All right. So we have to make projections based on our data to try to see what our targets are going to be. In addition to the 2 mandatory metrics, we're also going to have two mandatory metrics at the member level each. So every member will have to make projections of the number of adults who become participants. By definition, a participant is anyone who has 12 or more hours. However, you know, with how funky everything's been given COVID, right? They're kind of looking into how to redefine participants. Currently, they're swinging towards like anyone who has an enrollment in any of the adult education areas. So basically anyone enrolled in any of the adult education areas. And we'll go into that in a little bit more detail soon too. And then the second metric that must be done at the member level is the percentage of available funds spent. What that actually means is, you know, in every given budgetary year, like how much of the total funding you're receiving are you going to spend within that year? And you have to account for your carryover. So for example, say your institution is receiving like $2 million in CAPE funding that year, plus you have like $1.1 million of carryover. In total, you have like $3.1 million. So of that $3.1 million, first you have to get rid of that first $1.1 million. So then after that, how much of that $2 million left are you going to spend within that year? And you have to do that for each of the 3 years, right? So those are the metrics done at the member level.
Right, thank you, Jason. And then I'm just going to briefly go over the optional metrics. So as Jason mentioned, those 4 are the mandatory that we do have to set targets on, but there are a lot of other metrics that are available on the launch board. And then just for the CAPE planning purposes, they're all optional, what's on your screen. But just for our presentation purposes, we're going to go over them because those metrics are still relevant. They might not apply to the plan. They might be optional to the plan, but they do get examined. They do get looked at and get reported in the launch board. And so we wanted to cover those as well, and we'll go in details of how they look like on the launch board, but they're kind of bucketed into how you're going to see them on launch board. So we have under progress, those participants. So all these outcomes are only captured for participants. So as Jason made a distinction in the earlier slide, we have number of adults served. That's all of your non-credit enrollments or students served. And then you have your participants, and that has to be in the CAPE specific program areas. So these outcomes that are listed on the screen, they're only being looked at those students who have been identified as participants. So then outcomes under progress, there's education functioning level gains that are examined under progress. There's students, whether they completed an L Civics co-op, and we'll go over what the description of these mean, when we are in the launch board. And under success, our high school diploma graduates or those who receive GED or equivalency are looked at. Those who earned a CDCP certificate, so that's post-secondary credential. Under transition, they look at a subpopulation of students who are like in ESL, ABE, or ASE, their transitional outcomes to post-secondary. So, are they transitioning to credit side of post-secondary or transition to CTE, like non-credit CTE? And then they look at employment earning outcomes for only students who are exiters, so who have exited the system and are not taking classes, no adult education or community college. They have to completely exit the system in order to look at the outcomes for employment and earnings. And we'll go a little deeper who gets included and who gets excluded for these metrics. And now I'm going to share my screen, and we are going to actually look at Launchboard. All right.
And I went ahead and put the link in the chat already, so anybody can access it and kind of walk through it with this visual as well.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, Dulce. And here is the launch board, and you already have the link to it. And when you go on this link, it kind of takes you to the statewide numbers. So if we want to drill down, and it allows us to drill down actually at the region level, if we just want to see data of what does, it looks like for Orange County, and it will basically aggregate all of the consortia and then give you at Orange County level. But if we only care about, our consortium, then we would select from the consortia and look at North Orange Adult Regional Consortium, North Orange County Regional Consortium for Adult Education. And then if we want to, only look at NOCE data, then we would go on North Orange Adult. But for now, I'm just going to keep it at a consortium level. And then for 2019-20, and then they have data going from 2016-17, so we can look at the data at a specific year, but they also have data like time trends. So we should be able to see data across years as well. And then click view. And then just wanted to point here too under detailed data comparison. And I'm pretty sure I'm just taking Jason. I just took over Jason's presentation. Sorry, Jason. But again, I got so excited about Launchboard. I live in this, like I'm on this like every single day, every single minute, I feel like. And then you can also compare NOCRC's or NOC's data to other consortium or to the state or to statewide data or other community college districts. So just wanted to point to that as well. And then now, Jason, I'm going to let you tell me what to click on, because we were just going to show you where the data lives for different metrics.
Well, I guess the first thing we might want to point out is if you click up on the top right, the MDD, right? So
right here.
Yeah, up there. For anyone who's ever curious about how all these metrics are calculated, they actually include this right here, and you can see like pretty much every single calculation that the state puts in to actually calculate these numbers. So I mean, they're pretty transparent. They are all about transparency. They're actually a really wonderful team, and you can also reach out to them for questions. You can reach out to us for questions if you have questions about how any of this stuff is calculated, and we'll get to you too. So like, but this would be like the first source for anything. If you ever question like how stuff is being looked at, right? And then after that, yeah, let's the next metric that we've I guess the first metric that we want to look at is our adults served, right? So as you can see, you know, we have 26,751 adults served. That's basically calculated by looking at like everyone who is touched by NOCE. When we say touched by NOCE, that includes everyone who has an enrollment in the enrollment file that we submit to MIS. Oh, Cal Adult Ed versus Cal Pass Plus. All right, let's go to that first. Well, Cal Pass Plus basically is just where like all the Launchboard suite lives. You can actually find the student success metrics here, which they use for the student-centered funding formula. For example, you can look at the strong workforce program. Like, yeah, have to just click on the Launchboard menu, I guess, and then just like home. So yeah, and this is just like the suite of all the different launch boards they have. It's nice that they actually made this publicly accessible. I mean, like 3, 4, 5 years ago, 5 years ago, yeah. At that point, you know, it was actually locked behind a CalPass account first. So, but after that, you know, they kind of opened it up to everyone versus, you know, Cal Adult Ed. If you go to caladulted.org, that's actually, you know, the CAPE website itself. And, you know, you can find all the information for like, you know, like any sort of information about, you know, resources, or if you have any questions, like they have fact sheets, they have resources for adults. You can find trainings on there, like if you're interested in any of the webinars, any of that kind of stuff. That's all at the Cal Adult Ed website itself. You know, it used to be aebg.org, right? Now it's Cal Adult Ed because after the name change and all that. So that's that. Sorry. And back to the adult served. We're just trying to fly through here, you know. So in terms of adult served, yeah. So again, it's anyone with an enrollment or anyone who was touched by the student services. The student services that they looked at are, you know, anyone who received an orientation assessment ed plan, who was touched by a counseling appointment, right? Those are the kinds of things we submit. Furthermore, they'll also look at anyone who was touched by financial aid. That would count. We don't offer financial aid within our institution, but, you know, if we did, financial aid would be looked at. They also examined students with disabilities, anyone touched by the Students with Disabilities program through the Students with Disabilities Services, that would also be examined. So those are the kinds of things that they look at in terms of who they touch as reportable individuals. That's from the MIS side of things. From the adult ed side of things, so for our friends from like the ROP or Garden Grove Unified, right? They look at TOPS-Pro data. So they just grab everyone who is reported through their TOPS-Pro system. We actually do report some folks through our TOPS-Pro system. And in the event that we have folks in our TOPS-Pro system who don't show up in our MIS files, they also take those students into account too. They try to get a comprehensive picture of everyone who was touched by adult ed by putting together these two data sources, then, you know, making the best they can out of it, right? Because we want to show who we're touching and everyone that we're touching, because we touch a lot of lives, right? Right, all right. So then after that, we want to look at the 4 barriers. There are actually a lot of barriers. Like, you want to navigate to the barrier section? Cool, thank you. Oh, so for our barriers section, there are actually quite a few barriers, but the ones that CAPE is focusing on right now are English language learners, low literacy, low income, and long-term unemployed, right? So yes, as you can see, for long-term unemployed, they actually check to see if you're long-term unemployed as of the current year, right? So they're only looking at the selected year versus the other ones. If you were ever flagged as low literacy, if you were ever flagged as low income, or if you were ever flagged as an English language learner, you're always going to be within those buckets. You're always going to be part of that population. A quick side note about how they determine all this. It's either through self-reported data through TOPS-Pro or self-reported data through MIS. For the most part, there is a caveat that, for example, English language learners and low literacy students, English language learners, they also include anyone who is enrolled in an ESL class in that population. And for low literacy students, they'll include anyone who is enrolled in an adult basic education or an adult secondary education population into those 2 populations. So enrollment actually matters when determining who these students are. Further, for our low income students, they're generally looked at through our VITIA survey data, and that usually comes from students who self-enroll in our case, because the VITIA is asked before registration at that point, and that's primarily to anyone who registers online. So those are just a couple of data points to note regarding this data, right? And then next, we want to look at our adults who become participants, right? So our participants are anyone who enroll in 12 plus hours in any single program area. As you can see, these are the program areas that they look at. They look at ESL, they look at adult basic education, they look at adult secondary education, they look at CTE, they look at programs for adults with disabilities, and they basically look at parenting. That's the short way of saying that, right? Support child school success. It's hard to say, it's a tongue twister. Three S's and a C all in sequence, kind of hard to say, so I'm probably not gonna try saying it right now. But yeah, so for us, it's basically parenting, right? So the things to note about this, as I'd mentioned prior, I think, again, it is, since it does say 12 plus hours, but because of the COVID pandemic, currently they are seriously, strongly considering, and I think they are actually moving towards looking at anyone with any enrollment, not necessarily 12 plus hours. So anyone with any enrollment in those program areas. The other thing that we must consider is that these are based on, these are also based on the program areas as defined by how our courses are coded on the MIS level. So what we may consider something as CTE or as DSS or as ESL may not necessarily be how the state looks at things, right? So for example, you'll see that 49% of our adult ed population is enrolled in CTE. That's because they look at basically anyone who's enrolled in the vocational top code, right? And we may have stuff outside of our specific CTE program area that is, counted as CTE just because of the way things are structured within our data. So these are just a few things to consider, right? The other thing I guess we should also consider is that, a large percentage of our students are enrolled in emeritus, and as such, they are students served, but they would not be counted as a participant in that unless they meet some other sort of criteria that puts them into one of the other program areas, because they look at program areas across all across all program areas, right? So those are the most important things to note there. Sorry, Evan, back to you.
Thanks, Jason. Yeah, I just wanted to point that out. And that's why you see that big distinction between, number of students that are being counted here as your adults served versus those who are identified as participants, because this is focused on just CAPE program areas, whereas this number takes into account our students who are in emeritus program and takes into account all students being served by our support services like counseling. And this number is only enrollments, and that too with specific, hours of instruction. Students need to have 12 or more, which the definition may change moving forward. But at that time, they were looking at 12 and more hours of instruction within academic year in CAPE program areas. Right. So now I just want to go over the metrics that were on the second slide. So if you remember those optional metrics, and they were bucketed into kind of like what the, these tabs look like. So under progress, we talked about 4 metrics that are kind of optional, or sorry, that's not what I meant. I meant to click on detailed data that we can possibly set targets for. So one of the metric was whether participants completed 1 or more educational functioning levels. And if you remember from our slide, there were actually 3. This metric was broken down into 3 metrics, and that's because they look at the specific populations. Right now, this is looking at all participants who were in ESL, ABE, or ASE program. However, on the list, it shows you that, there's ABE, there's ASE, and there's ESL student populations. And what are their education functioning levels, right? So education functioning levels are calculated based on either pre and post testing. So if any of you are from ESL program or basic skills, you might remember, in CASAS, we do pre and post testing. And then that determines whether the student, if they made a gain on their post test, then that means they made an educational functioning level gain, and that's how a student may get counted here. However, a student may also get counted based on their courses, because some of our ESL courses, if like we have those that go from like low literacy, beginning literacy, all the way to advanced, and those courses are sequenced. So if students are moving from lower levels of ESL to higher levels, then that means the students are making gains, and that's all dependent on our course coding and how we how we code our courses, and whether we can show that students are making progression. And if students do make progression, then that means they're making an educational functioning level gain, and then that's how they will be counted toward this metric. And then the second metric under progress, or the fourth on the list, was completed an immigrant integration milestone. So this looks to see, at least for NOC, how this is relevant is if a student passes our NOC e-citizenship class. So they need to have a pass or a satisfactory progress, I believe, SP, in order to be counted. So they look to see whether student completed these LCIVIC course, and then if they do, they get counted toward this metric. And this comes from our MIS data, and then this also for adult education comes from CASAS data. All right, and then now going back to other metrics. So under success, I know we only have like 9 minutes, so now I'm going to breeze through again. Please stop me if there's a question. I don't want you to be like, oh, like, you know, and don't make sense. So please do stop me, but I just still wanted to familiarize you with these different metrics. So under success, we had talked about high school diploma, right? So participants who earned a diploma, GED, or high school equivalency. So the important note to make here is like prior to 2021, this was only captured from our CASAS data. So there was under MIS, there was no element that allowed us to capture this under this specific metric. We were still reporting our high school graduates data through MIS, but it was being counted under post-secondary credential and not under this. But starting 2021, Chancellor's office, they created an element under MIS that allows us to report high school graduates under this metric. So you will see the data may look different. Starting 2021, we may have more students here, but prior to that, they were being counted under post-secondary credential, and the only data that was being reflected here, it was from CASAS data. All right, and then the second metric under success was post-secondary credential, and this metric looks at all of the CDCP certificates that are awarded to our students, right? So we, in 2019-20, if I remember correctly, we had the ESL CDCP certificates, we had the college prep certificate, then we had our CTE certificates. And Jason, please chime in if I missed any in terms of post-secondary credential, but that's all I remember. Or you can always go to our dashboard, IER, where we do show, but we show all certificates, both CDCP and internal certificates under dashboard actually. And then under transition, you'll notice here that there's no data available for 2019-20 because transition metric and the employment and earnings metrics look at data 2 years. So there is a time lag. So this looks to see whether students achieved that outcome within that same year and the subsequent year. So that's why the 2019-20 data will be available when the 2021 data is released. So for the optional metrics, we're asked to look at whether students transition to post-secondary, and this is broken into whether they're transition to CTE, so non-credit or credit CTE for the first time. So student cannot have enrollments prior in the post-secondary, right? So they have to go from ESL, ABE, or ASE to CTE for the first time to be counted as transition to CTE. And then transition to non-development credit college, same process, but they have to go into non-development credit college course for the first time in that year or the subsequent year to be counted toward this metric. And this metric is the only metric that only looks at specific population. So it only looks at ESL students, not this metric, but transition metrics look at ESL, ABE, and ASE participants. So if, we know at NOCE, we have other student groups, like we have our DSS program, we have our other programs that offer courses, but if students make that move from those programs to CTE, they will not be counted here for now. So hopefully the goal is to have them look at a broader scale and look at all students, all adult participants, and see their outcomes. And then lastly, we have employment and earning outcomes. And the two that you, if you remember from the list, were employment 2 quarters and after. And the important, thing to know for employment outcomes is that this is only looked for students who have exited the system. So that's why it's saying among exiters. So students cannot be taking any adult education courses or any community college courses. So they have to have completely exited the system in order to be even counted toward the denominator. And then secondly, the way this data gets looked at, they're actually using the Employment Development Department Unemployment Insurance Wage File, so EDD unemployment wage file. And in order for them to match our students need to have social security numbers. So if our students, if we're not collecting social security numbers or students are not reporting it, then they can't match that data. And then in order to provide outcome data, they need to be able to match that. So that's why the numbers probably will look slightly off, because it's probably not counting all of our students. And we also know that our students may gain employment and continue to take classes. So they're, obviously not taking that into account, and they're only looking at students who have exited the system. So just to be aware in terms of who gets included under these metrics or excluded. And the last one was, change in earnings. And this just looks, there is a description, and I haven't fully grasped this, what gets counted here, but if we read the definition, it's the median change in earnings of, again, exiters between the second quarter prior to the academic year of entry at any institution and the second quarter after the academic year of exit from the last institution attended. I'm still trying to grasp this metric, so I don't have it. It's so convoluted way to say that they're looking to see whether basically have students made any sort of increase in their earnings post all of the education they may have attained from taking our courses. And I think that is it in terms of metrics, but there's a lot more metrics I still wanted to point out. As you can see here, if you go under every single tab, there's there's a lot more metrics than what we went over, but I just wanted to kind of highlight those 10 optional metrics that we can choose from for CAPE planning purposes. And then any questions, because there's only 2 minutes left, so I don't know if were there any questions in the chat, Dulce, that we are?
No, I just put a bunch of, where our website is. So all of those pieces. But I think we can have a quick 2-minute discussion about really what we want to know. And maybe we go back to the other question, which was before this, it was what type of data would you like to have access to help inform your programmatic decisions and offerings? So thinking back now, kind of taking it back up at an institutional level, not necessarily, CAPE specific, but it applies to CAPE as well, is, for you, what type of data do you want to have access to help you make those decisions? Is it internal data, community data, demographic data? So I just wanted to open it up for like a minute or two about what is something that you are interested in looking at. And I'll type it in the chat too.
Or I'm even thinking, given just the time frame, all the data tools that we have shared, what did you find useful, or you think you can utilize in your decision making, or just learning about who our students are, or if there's anything that we need to dig deeper into that you thought we ran out of time or we didn't get a chance to, that you would be interested in learning more about.
Mm-hmm.
And you could just put in the chat or email us.
I know it was a lot. Well, I think, you know, this is not the first, actually. This is not the first conversation we've had around this, and it's not going to be the last conversation that we have around this. You know, as we're again understanding, I think one of the big takeaways is that now we are at a place where the state is looking at non-credit metrics, non-credit you know, outcome metrics for our students. And so now that we have a little bit more guidance from the state, really understanding how can we use these outcomes, how can we use this data to help inform us in our planning. So that's really the lens that we wanted to present this data in. I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up. I know we breezed through that. Like I said, this is not the last time that we're going to have this conversation. I'm sure we will revisit this. A brand new set of metrics for the 2021 academic year will be released out in around May. So we will revisit this again. And, you know, we'll keep kind of, you know, tearing apart every metric and having this discussion. Harpreet, do you have any final comments?
I just want to thank everyone who came by and shared your 1 hour with us. I know it was a lot, and hopefully moving forward, we can still continue to have these conversations and dig deeper into the data. And then please just like reach out and tell us if like there's additional things like, you know, you were interested in that we may have missed. Yeah, or that might be useful to you.
Great. Well, thanks everyone. If you didn't have a donut during this hour, go have a donut. Go have a donut right now. And I hope you have a great rest of the day. So thank you everyone for joining us. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.